Good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the Understanding of Incoterms webinar. My name is Judy Marie Rock, your project officer for this session today. I'm joined by our IT officer, Gavin Felician, and ICT manager, Richard Smith. Today, you will learn how to use Incoterms correctly in your trade transactions and avoid misunderstandings which may arise between different trading practices and different countries. Our facilitator is Mr. Bernard Black, Senior Project Officer, Customs and Trade Policy, CARICOM Secretariat. Mr. Black joined the Solution Custom and Excise Department in 1982 and quickly established himself as a dedicated and hard-working officer. During his 25 years of service, he successfully completed a bachelor's degree in business management at London South Bank University 2000 and a master's degree in international trade at UWE Cave Hill campus 2006. In 2007, Bernard joined the CARICOM Secretariat as a senior project officer responsible for customer and trade policy. He is an enthusiastic professional with proven leadership abilities in professional and social environments. Note that all questions would be entertained after Mr. Black's presentation, so feel free to note your questions and be prepared to submit such in the webinar chat box after the presentation. As Gavin would have mentioned, participants, please remember to select everyone in the chat box and mute your microphones. I will now turn you over to Mr. Bernard Black.
Good morning, colleagues. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good morning and welcome to this webinar on understanding Incoterms. Incoterms are extremely important standards that we need to know as traders, as policy makers in trade, and I will attempt in this presentation to assist your understanding of them and to give you some kind of understanding as to how it applies in situations of interregional trade within CARICOM member states. Incoterms are especially important because they help create an environment of predictability. And in CARICOM, in the single market arrangements, we want to create that predictability and to maintain it. We don't want situations where companies that have a presence in one country and under our right of establishment regime wants to set up a presence in another country will be faced with uncertainty in terms of goods being cleared at the border. There has to be some measure of safe predictability that will allow you as a trader to conduct a business without apprehension or fear that things could go wrong because the conditions for transportation and obligations are inconsistent. So Incoterms generally were developed by the International Chamber of Commerce, and they have become widely accepted, and they're based on international trade law. They are widely used in international commercial transactions, and that's because they're widely accepted because of their predictability. Their use in international sales is encouraged by trade councils, courts, and international lawyers because it allows for easy dispute settlement, it allows for arbitration, it allows for policy developers to use their good offices to arrive at acceptable solutions to any dispute that may arise. So, as an objective, an Incoterm rule is intended to clearly communicate the tasks, the costs involved, and the risks associated with transportation and delivery of goods. So on one hand, you have the supplier of the goods who will source those goods, either create them himself or source them from another location. And the intention, once payment is made, is to send them to a buyer, oftentimes across a border. And the rules are intended to clearly set out how that can work. They are also intended to reduce and remove altogether the uncertainties arising from different interpretation of rules in different countries. Judy Marine, in her introduction, mentioned the whole issue of trading with other countries, and that has become a very contentious issue in recent times. Countries that belong to a particular trading bloc, or countries that belong to a particular region, for cultural reasons, do trade differently. They do things in a way that we're not accustomed in the Caribbean, and therefore we need to set up rules that are interpreted exactly the same way, so that we don't have those misgivings. Now, Incoterms are represented by three-letter trade terms related to common contractual sales practices. So as I go along, you're going to see the terms. There's a long title for the term and a three-letter code that represents each Incoterm. But before I do that, a bit of history. The Incoterms were first issued in 1923 by the International Chamber of Commerce, and the first one published in 1936. They were amended at several intervals after that, and we're now on the 8th version, called Incoterms 2010, which were published on 1st January 2011. Now, with most trading instruments that have international coverage, there is a similar approach to Incoterms, and one of them is the harmonized system for classification that the Customs uses. The World Customs Organization is responsible for it, just like the International Chamber of Commerce is for the Incoterms. And those rules are reviewed every 5 years. So in a similar way, the revision takes place to keep abreast with trends in trade, with new arrangements that happen between buyers and sellers. So the International Chamber of Commerce is ensuring that it's not kept out of the loop, and that new arrangements are always captured in the Incoterms landscape. So Incoterms generally defines 11 rules. There were 13 rules in the previous version, so there are now 11. 2 were deleted, and the ICC has begun consultations on new revision of Incoterms as we speak, and these will be called Incoterms 2020, which will take effect in 2021. As it relates to customs declarations, you being based in Trinidad and Tobago, there is some impact of Incoterms on customs declarations. In some jurisdictions, the duty cost of the goods may be calculated against a specific Incoterm. In some countries, it might be FOB. In other countries, it might be something else. But in Trinidad and Tobago and all other CARICOM states, the Incoterm used for determining customs value and for payment of duty is CIF, which you'll hear about a little later, cost insurance and freight. Now, there are 11 predefined terms of Incoterms, and they're classified into 2 categories. There's 7 based on rules for any mode of transport, so they can apply to any form of transportation used. Those 7, and I've listed them here: X-Works, Free Carrier, Carriage Paid To, Carriage and Insurance Paid To, Delivered at Terminal, Delivered at Place, and Delivered Duty Paid. Each of them is preceded by the 3-letter code. The second set of Incoterms, those 4, apply to rules for sea and inland waterway transport. So those only apply to situations where ships are used, navigating by sea or upriver in the case of Guyana and Suriname. And those four are free alongside ship, free on board, cost and freight, and cost insurance and freight. But I'll be speaking of each of those in detail as I go along. Now, there are some defined terms within the Incoterms system that we need to be familiar with. I've just highlighted about 7 of them. The ones in red are the ones that you need to have a thorough understanding about, and that's one of them is delivery. The point in a transaction where the risk or loss or damage of the goods is transferred from the seller to the buyer. Think about the goods moving from the seller's possession and the buyer receiving it at some point along the way. So delivery happens at the point where that handover takes place, where the risk moves away from the seller to the buyer. Another key term to be mindful of is free. The seller has an obligation to deliver the goods to a named place for transfer to the carrier. So you sometimes hear free alongside ship, free on board. That free has that meaning that the seller has the obligation to deliver the goods to a named place for transfer to a carrier. I've highlighted the word terminal. Terminal is a place, whether covered or not, such as a dock, warehouse, container yard, or road, rail, or cargo terminal. So in the Incoterms system, a terminal is a place, not necessarily a port, not necessarily a customs approved area that is agreed to between both parties where that delivery can take place. And I'll speak a little more about terminal a little later. Now, in terms of the 11 Incoterms, 3 of them, there are 3 types of Incoterms. So I mentioned that there are 11 categories, but within that 11, there are 3 types. They're the F terms. The F terms are the ones that involve delivery arrangements in the exporting country. And the C terms involve the seller's obligations to freight arrangements. There are 4 F terms and 4 C terms. And the D terms, there are 3. These involve delivery arrangements in the destination country. Now, for the purpose of this presentation, I will explain the Incoterms as it relates to the F terms, C terms, and D terms. I think you'll have a better appreciation for the concepts if I approach it that way. Okay?
Connected.
Right, so the first F term to deal with is X works. The F terms, as I said earlier, involve delivery arrangements in the exporting country. So, X works means that the seller delivers the goods for the disposal of the buyer at his premises. So, simply put, the seller produces an item at a particular location. If that location is, say, Point Lisas, the buyer is responsible for picking up the goods from his Point Lisas warehouse. So all this seller is obligated to do is to present those items to at his premises for the seller to pick up. So the responsibility of the parties are the seller is to make the goods available for pickup. The buyer is responsible for picking up the goods from the seller. And the buyer is responsible for the logistical arrangements, the inland freight, clearance formalities, and conveyance to the destination. Now, the example I'd like to use for that is the farm gate arrangements in bulk agriculture. Here in Guyana, the radio would announce from time to time the availability of goods, produce by their seasonality, and would say, they would quote 2 prices, the market price, which is what you pay at the market, and the farm gate price, which is what you pay at the farm. So, if you want to buy farm gate products, the buyer is responsible for getting to the farm with his vehicle, and pay the farmer for his produce, which is obviously less than what it pay at the market. So that arrangement can be described as an ex-works arrangement. You drive to the place of selling, the seller is only obliged to have the goods ready for you, and it's picked up by the buyer. Right? A key point to remember is that the seller is to produce documentation as well, such as an invoice, a packing list, and a truck bill of lading. Now, the truck bill of lading is not a document that we use frequently in CARICOM, but we use other documents that can do the same thing. And the purpose of the truck bill of lading is to prove that the ex-works arrangement was met. Okay? The document would say that the goods, say 200 pounds of pumpkins, were picked up at Mr. Deer's farm on a particular day, and an exchange was done at a unit price showing the total amount paid. So the truck bill of lading is really an assurance to the buyer that the conditions of the transportation and the delivery were met. Seller also is responsible for the documentation, and documentation is important in trade because an invoice would give an indication at the end with the by customs at its destination to show what was the value of the goods that was negotiated between both parties. Okay? The customs at the end would have to make a determination as to whether to accept that value, and more importantly, to calculate the duty payable. So the seller always has that obligation to create an invoice, some kind of document to show that the goods were purchased, under what conditions, the quantity, the unit price, the final value of those goods, and a signature indicating that the goods have been transferred in terms of ownership. The next F term is Free Carrier Act, FCA. In this arrangement, the seller makes goods available at his premises. Unlike the ex-works arrangement, the buyer is responsible for loading the goods onto their truck. So we have a similarity with ex-works. The only difference is the seller makes his goods available, but the buyer comes to the location and loads the goods himself. Now, in many respects, the Incoterm that is negotiated between both parties has a lot to do with the nature of the goods, the kind of goods that we're dealing with, its composition, its handling issues, and both parties would be advised to choose an Incoterm that best suits the arrangement and the goods in question. So with this particular case, the example that I've used is the same farm gate in agricultural trade, but it relates to live chicks. Some of you may be aware that chicks are born in an incubator. They are born like hundreds of them, and they have to be moved from one location to the next, sometimes across borders. So the person who's buying those chicks may want a FCA arrangement to say that I will come to your farm to pick up those chicks, but I want to handle them myself because those are very delicate creatures. They could die from overexposure, too much heat. They could die from handling, from a rough road ride. So the seller might decide, okay, I'm coming to your farm with my own plastic crates, my own specially designed vehicle, so that I could put these chicks, 10 of them in a crate, and load them up properly to ensure that they're properly ventilated, and that I'm going to drive carefully to get them to its destination. So Free Carrier Act is an Incoterm that could describe that exchange. So the key points to bear in mind is that the seller is to produce documentation as well, packing list, and a truck bill of lading, which is the proof that you need that FCA was met. So the truck bill of lading would indicate that the goods were delivered at the premises of the supplier and were loaded by the buyer. So we go to the next F term, free alongside ship. This one sounds self-explanatory. Free alongside ship, meaning that the supplier has an obligation to bring those goods alongside ship. So free alongside ship means that the seller delivers the goods alongside the vessel, on a berth or a barge, for example. The buyer, the documents are named to the buyer, but they are placed next to the ship, but they're not loaded. And that's critical. They are not loaded. They are only taken alongside the ship. And the responsibilities of the parties are the seller delivers when the goods are alongside the vessel. Delivery happens at that point. The seller produces documentation, like I mentioned before, and the buyer is responsible for loading the goods onto the ship. Again, FAS would apply based on the type of goods involved. An example I've used here is bulk water exports. There are some countries in CARICOM that have an abundance of water, Dominica and Guyana in particular. And a call has been made for people to invest in the exportation of fresh water. In fact, worldwide, it has been said that water might even be more expensive than crude oil. So you want to move this water in large quantities from one country to the next. So the way it's going to work, a supplier of water, let's use the Dominica example, would be the Dominica Water Authority. They would have that water stored in tanks on the shore side. Those tanks would be connected to pipelines running along the berth where the ship would tie up. And when the ship ties up, the water is loaded onto the ship by the ship's owners. That's the important thing. The ship owner, because loading ships can become a very scientific thing in terms of avoiding rollovers at sea and proper weight distribution, the ship will decide that we're going to load this water ourselves throughout the tanks on board the vessel, right? And once that is done, the ship sails away. So the risk is transferred from that point onto the buyer. And in a similar way, the seller is to produce documentation, invoice, packing list, truck bill, to show that, or to prove rather, that the handover took place under the conditions of the Incoterms. So the description of the goods involved being moved in the transaction would to a great extent determine the Incoterm that is most suitable for the transaction. The final F term is free on board, FOB. Free on board means that the seller delivers the goods to a vessel nominated by the buyer at the named port of shipment. And the responsibilities of the parties are that the seller ensures that the goods are loaded on the vessel. So we're going a step a little further than free alongside ship. The seller has the additional responsibility of loading the goods on the vessel. The seller also produces documentation, including the bill of lading, and the buyer is responsible for receiving the goods at the destination. The example I would use for that one to describe an FOB situation would be a used car shipment from a Japanese manufacturer or salesperson. Those of us who spend a lot of time on the internet looking at cars, which I do sometimes, would find out that there are people in Japan, individuals like me and you, who want to sell their car. They advertise their car on a website, and you go onto this website, and if you like it, you go into a personal negotiation with that individual. If you agree, the individual would accept the price, and the conditions would include putting the vehicle on the vessel. Now, that situation suits an FOB arrangement because you're in the Caribbean, the seller is in Japan, you're dealing with two individuals who have put both have their integrity on the line, one to send money, the other to send a car. And the one who's selling the car has given you his or her word that I'm going to place it on a ship. And from that point, you look after the car coming to you and your other formalities. So the bill of lading comes in very important in a situation like that. So the key point to remember is that the bill of lading is a document of title. So the original bill of lading gives you the entitlement of ownership of this vehicle. And it is what the seller uses to transfer ownership to you. Okay? So at that point, you as the buyer in the Caribbean would be responsible for paying the freight and other charges related to getting that car to you. So if you want to pay the freight to collect in your own country, or you want to use a freight forwarding company in Japan to do it on your behalf, the seller could assist you with that, but the seller has no obligation to pay that freight. Now, we move to the C terms. The C terms I mentioned before are the ones that involve the seller's obligation where it concerns transport arrangements. The transport arrangements often come with a cost, and when it comes to understanding responsibility, there are Incoterms that do that very well. So the first one is cost and freight. The code is CFR. So cost and freight means that the seller will deliver the goods to the vessel and must contract for and pay the goods, pay the cost and freight, and bring the goods to the named port of destination. Okay? So the responsibilities are that the seller is to contract for carriage, which means that the seller has to arrange to get the goods carried from his point to your point. The seller is to deliver the goods on board the vessel with the main carriage paid to the named point in the country of destination. So let's just flash back to the same car. The person in Japan would have to arrange for transportation, get the vehicle onto the vessel, indicate the point at which this vehicle is to be discharged. So it may be Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago, which is the final port of destination, country of destination. Then the seller is to provide a clean transport document, a bill of lading or seaway bill. The seaway bills are hardly used these days, but the bill of lading is more the document, preferred document. And just like in the FOB situation, the bill of lading would give transfer ownership from the seller to the buyer. And the seller's obligation is to arrange export clearance. So once the goods arrive at its destination, the seller is to handle all of the documentation, customs formalities, and other government requirements from this point onwards. An example I can use for this one, this Incoterm, is that it's used for situations where the seller has direct access to the vessel for loading. Example, dress lumber. In CARICOM, there are exporting companies in Belize that send lumber to other member states, Guyana as well. In recent years, Honduras was a country that sent a lot of lumber to CARICOM member states, dress lumber. And the companies that owned the lumber yards had set up alliances with shipping companies. So the sellers had direct access to the vessel. The vessels, some of them were specially designed to carry lumber. I remember one of those vessels called Babuyan many years ago. It was a very high wall ship, just like a car carrier. And the lumber would be placed in there and sailed across the Caribbean Sea to the islands with this dress lumber. So the key point to remember here is that this rule is used for restricted to goods transported by sea or inland waterway. Okay, so you can't use this rule really for aircraft and other modes of transport. It's usually restricted to sea and inland waterway. Our next C term is CPT, Carriage Paid To. Carriage Paid To means that the seller delivers the goods to the carrier or another person nominated by the seller at an agreed place, and is agreed between parties. And the seller is contracted for and to pay the cost of carriage necessary to bring the items to the named place of destination. So this is similar to the previous one. The responsibilities are quite clear. The seller is to deliver the goods to the point of export. Seller to deliver to the goods to the point of export. Seller to load onto carrier and to pay for the freight. The seller is under no obligation to insure the goods. And the buyer is to conduct the clearance formalities on arrival. The buyer is also to transport the goods to the final destination. So an example I would use is medicine on a cargo aircraft. You have carriers like Amerijet, which flies from Florida to most of the CARICOM member states. A company in the pharmaceuticals business would use this Incoterm to ship a shipment of medication from the United States to Trinidad. Okay, so the seller is to get this item to the point of export, pay the freight. Because medications are goods that could become perishable, that have special transportation characteristics, the seller may not venture to insure those goods. They may not be willing to do it. So the owner of the goods is the one who has to determine which kind of insurance I need, which one best suits the situation for that particular type of goods. So the owner of the goods, the buyer, needs to keep the key points in mind. These can be used for any mode of transport or where there is one-on-one transport mode. The risk is transferred from the seller to the buyer at the point where the goods are taken in charge by the carrier. So think about the goods moving from the warehouse or the factory where the goods were made. They're moving towards the direction of the buyer, and at the point where the goods are taken in charge by the carrier, then the supplier's obligation ends there. Then CIF, this is the most common Incoterm that we use in CARICOM, cost insurance and freight. CIF means that the seller supplies the goods, delivers the goods, pays for the freight, and also the insurance. And then the responsibilities are set out here. The seller is to contract for carriage and insurance. The seller is to deliver the goods on board. The seller is to provide a clean transport document and cargo insurance. Proof of insurance, either by policy or certificate. And the seller also arranges export clearance. So the buyer's obligation is just to receive those goods and to do the customs formalities. An example I could give of this, it's new car shipments from Japan. Unlike the used cars, the new cars have a certain amount of predictability with the wear and tear, because it's really zero. Those cars have not been used before. They're new. And because of that, the manufacturer may have an arrangement with a shipping line. So the Toyota company, the Nissan company, may have an arrangement with a shipping company to ship all cars that are new from its factory. And they would arrange to pay the freight for a fleet of vehicles. So if they're shipping out 500 vehicles at a time, they're going to pay a basic freight for 500 vehicles, which are new, which don't have any surprises in terms of things going wrong on destination. So that's an example of CIF that could be used as an Incoterm for such a transaction. The first key point to note is that the safe loading of the ship. The safe loading on the ship is where the risk passes from seller to buyer. The CIF, as I mentioned earlier, is valid for customs purposes in CARICOM member states. The seller is obligated to minimum insurance coverage, and it's important that the buyer is in agreement with the insurance arrangement. So when goods are being shipped to you, CIF, a tip to bear in mind is, whilst the insurance cover there is insurance cover, it may not be adequate for the goods in question. So there must always be agreements between both parties as to what insurance cover, the extent of it, of which is agreeable by both parties. Our final C term is carriage and insurance paid to, CIP. Carriage and insurance paid to means that the seller delivers the goods to the carrier or another person nominated by the seller at an agreed place. It's a similar arrangement to CIF, but it's more frequently used in air transport. Okay? So the obligations are: the seller is to contract for carriage and insurance. The seller is to deliver the goods on board. The seller is to provide a clean transfer document and cargo insurance. And the seller arranges export clearance. Now, just a little on cargo insurance. Insurance is sometimes a must for certain types of goods, depending on the items being fragile or subject to them being perishable. It's always advised that as a trader, you insure your goods, even if it's for a minimum amount. Because the nature of transportation of goods is uncertain. Ship could leave, or an aircraft could leave a destination in fine weather, with all good conditions, and en route, things could happen. The weather could turn bad, there could be equipment failures, and goods could be lost. So it's always a good idea to insure your goods, even if it's for minimum insurance coverage. And considering what you could lose in terms of value versus an insurance premium, it is worth paying that premium. So the example I'd use in this particular Incoterms, CIP, is shipping fragile goods like cargo aircraft. And you know, flat screen TVs, I've heard so many sad stories of people who buy them, ship them with some minimum freight.
Can you plug it on and put on the movie for her, please?
Or minimum packaging. They don't specify what kind of packaging they want. The items arrive at its destination, and they arrive damaged. And then there's a dispute as to who's going to pay for the damage. So it's always a wise idea to ensure that your insurance cover, based on the nature of the goods, cover all the possibilities that could arise. In fact, some of the people who sell would even advise you what kind of insurance that you need. Some people trying to save money, they decide, we're not going to insure, we'll take a chance. And oftentimes, that's when things go wrong. Okay? So the key points there are that CIP is similar to CIF arrangements. Most times, air freight is used. The buyer's obligations are the same in the case of CIF. And it is important that the buyer is in agreement with the insurance arrangements. So we come down to the final type of Incoterms, which are the D terms. D terms are the ones that involve delivery arrangements in the country of destination. So we first looked at the F terms that were focused on delivery at the point of export. Then we looked at the C terms, which involved the obligation of both parties as it relates to transport arrangements. So now we've ended the journey and we're at the point of destination. So the D terms, those three, regard those three situations. So we have delivered at terminal. So the delivered at terminal means that the seller delivers the goods once unloaded from the arriving carrier to a place at the disposal of the buyer at a named terminal and a named port of place of destination. I need to go back to the term terminal I mentioned earlier as one of the terms within Incoterms that we need to know. And the terminal includes a place, whether covered or not, such as a quay, warehouse, container yard, or road, rail, or air cargo terminal. So the responsibilities here of the parties is that the seller bears all the risks involved in bringing the goods to and unloading them at the terminal. The seller is also to prepare documentation. Buyer, meanwhile, is to attend to customs formalities and conveyance to the final destination. Um, an example I want to use as a terminal is how we ship bulk sand in CARICOM. Guyana is a country with large deposits of sand that the construction industry needs. Most of Guyana's sand is inland, it is not salty. They do not, because of its low salt content, it is good for mixing into concrete and metal, steel foundation. So there's great demand for it. But how is the sand moved? Most times the sand is moved by a barge. So the seller would get the sand loaded onto a barge. The barge will be towed to a member state, say like Grenada. But when it gets to Grenada, the customs formalities are such that a barge by its nature cannot be brought into a port. It's a very long and wide and awkward piece of equipment, and often discharging sand from a barge at a port is quite time consuming. So how barges are managed is that they're brought to a place like a beach or a landing along the coast where there's a flat piece of land nearby where the items could be discharged. And the customs will require to appoint such a place as a terminal for that purpose. So in the customs law, it has a surfer's law, where the controller will allow this barge to go to beach X to deliver the sand over a 2-week period. And the buyer at that point will be responsible for handling customs formalities and moving the sand truckload by truckload to its various destinations. Okay? So in that situation of bulk sand delivered at terminal, and the terminal in this case has to be named, delivered at terminal BG Beach, for example. That's a beach in Castries, Constitution, I'm from, where there have been deliveries like that before. Okay? Delivered at terminal Cul-de-Sac Bay, which is another place where that also happens. Our next D term is delivered at place. Delivered at place means that the seller delivers the goods to a place at the disposal of the buyer. Once the carrier has arrived, ready for unloading at a named place or destination. We have the responsibility of the parties. Seller bears all risks involved in bringing the goods to the named place. Seller to produce documentation, obviously, and the buyer is to handle the customs formalities. And I can think of an example that is becoming trendy in CARICOM, which is the online purchasing business, where the buyer, they buy something online and request that it be delivered to a shopping mall, for example. At the shopping mall, there is a company that deals with online shopping. So the goods are brought to this shopping mall. The customs would have done the formalities there. And the buyer has to handle those formalities with the customs. And the buyer goes there and pays a flat fee. It's paid and they take possession of their goods. In cases like that, the point to remember is that the seller usually has a business arrangement with the carrier. So Amazon.com, for example, may have an arrangement with DHL and FedEx. So you would buy the goods online, they would endeavor to ship it to you via that carrier, and based on the location where you want to send the place, it will be sent to that place. So all you need to do is to show up with your money and pay to get it. I must tell you also that in that arrangement, delivered at place, there is usually some understanding between customs and carrier, FedEx, or even the dealer who is actually handing over you those goods in the shopping mall. And the arrangement normally has to do with what goods will the customs allow to pass without duty, what are the goods that they want to keep back for revenue or national security reasons. In each country, the terms are different, but approach is the same. The customs would have a special person at a FedEx depot, for example, doing exactly that. So they may decide on, the usual approach is that they may decide on a value threshold. So the customs and FedEx will agree anything of a CI value or value below $100 for personal use, we'll let go free. So you're talking about things like medication, contact lens, a pen, small items. If it exceeds $100, then you start the formality for paying customs duty. But with that framework, the delivered at place Incoterm becomes more clear. And so you can decide at which place it could be delivered. And we move now to final delivered duty paid. So delivered duty paid means that the seller delivers the goods at a place of the buyer and it's set for import on arrival and delivered to the named place of destination. This is similar to the one previously in that the responsibility of the seller bears all the costs and risks involved in bringing the goods to the destination. The seller has an obligation to clear the goods, not only for export, but also for import. So in that case, FedEx would be looking at clearing the goods from its point of export in the US. They'll be also clearing the goods at its FedEx depot on arrival in your country, in Trinidad and Tobago. And the seller is to carry out all customs formalities. So FedEx is also clearing goods from customs on your behalf. And what you have really is a door-to-door arrangement. So you have paid Amazon for, as my example says, a mobile phone that's bought online. This phone is shipped by them via FedEx. FedEx has undertaken to clear this item from customs and bring it to you at your office. That's what door-to-door is. That's how the online business works. The whole idea is to get it delivered to where you want it delivered. Delivered duty paid. So it's delivered to you with duty being paid. And obviously on arrival, when you receive your package, you pay the seller an amount inclusive of all of the various steps that you went through, including the item itself. So I've completed the 11 Incoterms, taking the approach of in each of the three types, the F terms, the C terms, the D terms. I want to just amend that each Incoterm is to be followed by the name of the place to which the goods are delivered. So it's not just the term, but you must also say the point at which the delivery takes place. So in the case of the sand that I mentioned earlier, it will be free alongside ship Roseau. Roseau being a place in Dominica where, not the sand, sorry, the water, where the water is loaded onto this water tanker. I've said CIF Port-au-Prince to Port-au-Prince in Haiti. If you want to send a shipment of, say, rice to Haiti, Haiti consumes a lot of rice. A shipper, a seller in Guyana, who has links with a shipping company, could lower the shipment of rice, send it to Port-au-Prince on the CIF conditions. But it must, the destination point must be named after the Incoterm, as we have here. And the key point to recall is that having the name after the Incoterm reduces doubt about the obligation of the party. So once we hear the location, it gives us an understanding of the obligation of either the seller or the buyer. And just to wrap up some of the useful tips in using Incoterms, there's a lot written on Incoterms by the International Chamber of Commerce. They have a website dedicated to that. You could Google it, and there's quite a bit to read. Each Incoterm has much more detail than I explained. And it's always a good idea to familiarize yourself with those details. Okay? Okay, what I just gave today is a framework of how it works, what each party's responsibilities are. But if you have a particular interest in one or two special Incoterms, it's advisable that you get a thorough understanding of what that Incoterm is about. Then you need to ensure that the processes agreed to by the Incoterm are favorable to your interests. Okay? Don't forget, you are sending out the goods or you are receiving the goods. You need to choose an Incoterm that will protect you, that will cover your risk and not extend your risk to something else that you weren't prepared for. Because if you don't do that, it could lead to problems. For example, non-compensation for goods in case they get damaged or lost or stolen. Goods getting damaged en route to its destination is something that can easily turn nasty when insurance was not included in the mix. You don't want that. And at the end of all of that confusion, it's going to result in bad relationships between the seller and the buyer. And often, good relationships, as you would know as traders, could lead to many good things. You could, because of your long-lasting friendship and years of doing business, you can negotiate for discounts. You can negotiate for all kinds of benefits, special goods being developed for you. All of the things that can happen because of a good relationship can be lost if there's a dispute over an Incoterm that was not properly chosen. So I shall stop here and I shall take the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Black, for that insightful information shared this morning. Now we encourage all participants to ask questions in your chat box. Mr. Black will take each question in the order as they are listed. Where there is duplication, it will be indicated for your information. Any questions at this time? Please use your chat box. Mr. Black, we have some questions here. Sir, good morning. What is the best Incoterm for agri-exports? This is Mr. Mitchell.
Agri-exports. I would recommend the FOB one. The agri-exports, the buyer wants the comfort that the goods are to be, well, I'm taking it that the goods are traveling cross-border from Trinidad and Tobago, from a location in the Trinidad and Tobago. Am I correct?
Mr. Mitchell? He says yes, Mr. Black.
Okay, so the goods are coming in the Trinidad and Tobago. I would recommend that based on the kind of product that it is, if it's one that can be harvested, washed and packed in a box or a container that is temperature controlled, then FOB is a good arrangement. He would have to arrange, the importer, for shipping arrangements into Trinidad and Tobago, and the seller, meanwhile, would have to arrange for all of the documentation regarding those goods. One of the documentation descriptions has to do with the phytosanitary conditions of the items. This can be sensitive, but once it's planned properly, that can be adequately prepared. For agricultural products, I would recommend that a very long time before it's shipped, that you have your logistics in place, because you don't want a situation where the goods are delayed at any point of its transit from the seller to you. all agricultural products have a shelf life, some longer than others, and I would recommend that all your logistics, including documentation, is well thought out and planned. Because even if your goods are wholesome and well packed, you could get a delay if the documents are not straight or not fully prepared. So FOB, to answer your question, is what I recommend.
We have a question from TY Manufacturing Company Limited. I'm not sure. It says that would be processed and unprocessed. Could TY give us a little more specification, please? What is best Incoterm for exporting electrical items?
If the electrical items are very bulky, like transformers and cables and stuff like that, I'd recommend FOB or CIF. If they are lightweight, very perishable items, I would recommend CIF as well because of the insurance element. These items have a very long shelf life. They don't spoil. But the issue is the risk of pilferage. It's a real risk that you have to safeguard against. Therefore, I would recommend the CIF option.
Okay, Mr. Alistair Mitchell has asked, are there any examples for processed and unprocessed relevant to each specific industry?
Processed and unprocessed. I'm not sure what he means there, but I know at CARICOM there's a lot of processing that happens, and it happens frequently in our rules of origin regime, where companies import various inputs from ex-original sources to manufacture new item under regional origin and status. So, for example, a company might be in the business of making garments, like a shirt. So they import thread, they import cloth, they import buttons, all of which have 3 different tariff codes. And they prepare a shirt, which has a 4th tariff code, a code different to the other 3. So, situations like that, depending on the quantity and the destination from which it's coming, the source from which it's coming, might require FOB, Incoterm, or CIF. CIF arrangements usually mean that carriers are more reliable because they have an obligation to get those goods to a location in good time. And if your processing is time sensitive, I would recommend that you ship CIF to send away any headache that might arise in terms of goods getting damaged or lost.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Colleen has asked, what is the best for personal care items? Example, handmade soap. Do you need more explanatory information from Colleen?
Yeah, can you ask her what volumes of that soap that might be importing or shipping?
Colleen, while you're trying to formulate a response, we have Mr. Miraj asking, what is the recommended for chocolate, honey, and processed foods?
Okay. Honey and processed foods both have longer shelf lives. Honey, years at a time, I suppose. So, in terms of it being perishable, I don't see the need for us to move away from anything except FOB or CIF. When it comes to the chocolates, however, chocolates are sensitive to temperature, Some of them may even go rancid because of overexposure to whatever else. I would also recommend CIF also for chocolates. And also, if in addition to CIF, insisting on proper physical control, like temperature control, you may want to consider a reefer container with the air condition of a room temperature, say 27 degrees, to about 26, to keep chocolates fresh. But it all depends on the nature of the goods that you're sending. Once you understand the goods that you're dealing with, just apply the Incoterm that best suits your situation in terms of risk.
Okay, Colleen has responded, and she's saying that the quantity she's exporting is approximately 1,500 soaps. And there's a thank you from Mr. Miraj for your response, and Mr. Alistair Mitchell. Thank you. But in the meantime, Colleen is saying to her question, exporting approximately 1,500 soaps. What is the best personal care item, handmade soap for Incoterms?
Okay, Colleen, I recommend the cost and freight, CFR. You get the cost of the stove covered. The supplier will have to cover that as well as the freight. Insurance, I think you should do that yourself because you know the kind of soap that you're dealing with. You may want to have special insurance cover on it. Soap by its nature should be able to be an item that's not perishable over a short period, but I take it that you have a special mixture that goes into your soap, and you being familiar with the contents, you'll be in the best position to know the risk exposure that you face with in terms of transportation. So you would have to decide. You should take on the responsibility of insuring it to get the proper coverage that's necessary.
And Colleen says, thank you, sir.
Not a problem, Colleen.
If there are no other questions at this time, would we have any other questions at this time? We're open to questions.
What I can do, colleagues, if questions come to you later, put email your questions to me at bernard.black@caricom.org, bernard.black@caricom.org, and I can answer you via email.
Well, I guess, Mr. Black, this information is for all of the participants, and they are asking for a permission to provide them with a copy of your presentation.
Certainly. I will send it to you, Judy Marie, and you could forward to them.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions from any of the companies? Because we have many types of sectors represented here. Well, if there are no more questions, I'd like to say special thanks to CARICOM Secretariat, who has continued to support Export TT, and all our participants who engage in finding out the relevant information that can increase their overall exports through the training unit's efforts. Before we leave the platform, allow me to speak with you about the International Trade Specialist Program. This program, attainable through the EBS Export Academy of Ireland, is a highly interactive 9-month e-learning program recognized by the Institute of Export in the UK. As an exporter, you can qualify to pay €400 for the program, which is currently valued at €1,800. For more information, feel free to contact the training unit, in specific, Tanika Phillips at 623-5507, extension 373. We also value your feedback. Please ensure to complete the questionnaire, which will be emailed to you shortly. Thank you, and do enjoy the rest of your day. And I emphasize, of course, please help us to help you by completing the survey, which will be circulated today. And thank you, and I'd like to bring this session to a close.